Hello and welcome to IASPrimers. My name is Shubhashish and you're watching the daily news analysis for 14th of March 2022. Now, as part of our initiative, I make it a point to share questions for mains answer writing practice, and you can get your answers evaluated for free. So up to 2 answers every week. So you can share your answers in the handwritten format, maintain the register, that will act as your notes also, and share it in me in that format only, right? My details are there in the description box below. Now I have the question at the end today. So at the end of the paper, in the gist or the explainer section, there was a topic on citizens' reluctance to pay tax. And I thought these days there is the focus on static component. So we are seeing more of static questions in GS3, Indian economy. So I'm asking you the concept of tax buoyancy and what can be done to improve it, right? So this is the question that I'm going to cover with reference to this article. Obviously, we'll go beyond because this is just one part of tax buoyancy. Okay, right? So you can see the articles that we're doing, and predominantly the Ukraine thing is there in the focus, and I've shared enough questions on Ukraine by now. Okay. So first thing is about this Congress. This is the front page, and the Congress has lost terribly. And we can look at it from the point of view of trends in political system, trends in political parties. So in that way, we can consider this news. So Congress has lost the election. Congress was seen as a alternative to the BJP party at the center, at the national level politics. We are seeing that the Congress is weakening. So recently, assembly elections were conducted, and obviously the Congress fared very, very poorly. It lost even Punjab and Goa, where it was seen to be a strong contender. There also it lost considerably. So they are having this Chintan Shivar. They are having a meeting, right? Discussion, Chintan Shivar. Okay. So this is it. There is a reference of G23. Basically, they are saying that the Congress is not functioning very well. There is an issue with the leadership, and there needs to be some sort of an election, some sort of a working to reform the functioning of the Congress. Now I'll add few things to it, right? So we saw that BJP has emerged as a dominant party at the center as well as the states. Now upcoming elections will come up in 2024. So it depends now, what opposition do we have? Because opposition is very, very important. An institution that raises voice or raises whatever the problems are there with the ruling regime. So it raises a front against them. It criticizes, it dissents, right? So it keeps the major political party or the government in check. So what we are seeing these days is that Congress, like in UP it happened, Congress, Samajwadi Party, BSP, they ate each other's vote share. Likewise, now they are saying that we need to form an alliance, a united front, that this doesn't happen and we can act against the BJP party. So we're talking about Mahagathbandhan. And here we are seeing that the regional political leaders are becoming more prominent as compared to Congress. Earlier, whatever happened, and especially at the general elections or the elections to the Lok Sabha, the Congress played the key role. These days, Congress seems to be much weaker as compared to regional parties. So it has to be seen as to how these parties can come together and forge an alliance against the BJP. Else it's very, very difficult. And this is going to be a theme for ongoing editorials. I can tell you this in advance. Okay. Let's do this. India relocates embassy in Ukraine. Fine. Ukraine, the capital is under attack. So the embassy obviously your embassy or diplomats are not safe over there. So they are transferring their embassy to Poland, a neighboring state of Ukraine and Russia, and also Belarus. Check on the map. Okay. And we are seeing more incidents now, in fact, just now I got a ping on my app. So where it said that more and more attacks are going to take place because the shield of students, the Indian students or foreign students that were there in Ukraine, that was stopping the Russians to go all out against Ukraine. They were targeting the urban areas, but not so much. But with the students out, foreign students out, the international pressure will not be so much. So they are going all out against them. It will happen, right? So that is what is happening right now. Okay, now an unfortunate incident happened. Some memes are also there on the social media. Okay, so there is a supersonic missile, and we have only one supersonic missile as of now, that is BrahMos. So nobody has stated which missile it was there. So missile went deep inside Pakistan, more than 100 kilometers from India, Rajasthan. From there, 100 plus kilometers at supersonic speed, and very close to a Pakistani city, it fell down. No incident had taken place, but this missile had still gone. So naturally, Pakistan has raised concerns, and it raises concerns over India also. India's handling of these weapon technologies. This should not have happened. So what if nuclear warhead is there? What if it explodes in another country? So it undermines the credibility of the country. There is an editorial, we'll discuss this. So Prime Minister Modi, right, was briefed on the missile issue and refused defense situation. And all of this took place in something that you have read in your Lakshmikant, that is Cabinet Committee on Security. As the name goes, Cabinet Committee of the cabinet members, except for him, all of them are cabinet members. Right? He is the Ajit Doval, a national security advisor, and he is not actually the member of the Cabinet Committee on Security. So here is the Cabinet Committee on Security, and naturally it should comprise of the cabinet members and the composition as such. So Prime Minister of India, since he is the Prime Minister, the senior most minister, he is presiding over this. So we have Minister of Defense, Home Affairs, Finance and External Affairs. Okay, and what does this do? It reviews the security situation, as I said. It is the decision-making body it discusses and debates and decision-making body on senior appointments in the national security apparatus. Defense policy, expenditure, so all of this is looked by the Cabinet Committee on Security. Right, basically they take political decisions. Coming to this unguided missile, so Pakistan demands, I'll not read this exactly, Pakistan demands a joint probe that is both countries should investigate as to how this incident had taken place. Now think about it. They are saying that Indians were again working on some other missiles also, which are similar to BrahMos, supersonic speeds. In fact, BrahMos also, it has a range of 300 kilometers because of a restriction, that is Missile Technology Control Regime, which says that the payload of the missile, something that is imported, cannot be more than 500 kilograms. And payload means anything, something like a bomb or something. So the rocket is carrying that payload. And the range should be less than 300 kilometers. And the basic idea is very simple. To avoid the export of technology to a different country, like India has recently become part of the MTCR regime. So restriction on import or export of technology, that can be used as a platform to develop weapons of mass destruction. So to avoid the proliferation of this weapons of mass destruction, MTCR was created and India became a member in 2016. And this is the restriction. So Russia and India, this is a joint collaboration, right? Named on the two rivers of India, Brahmaputra and Russia, Muscovite. So therefore, because Russia was a member back then, it had a limitation. So 500 kg payload, and the range of this missile is 290 kilometers, and this is the supersonic missile. That is, it is much faster than the speed of sound. Now think, Pakistan is demanding for a joint probe. There is no doubt that there has to be an investigation, and this is a very serious problem. Your missile cannot go to another country's area. Just cannot go. It has to be fired and then only it should go. So the government says technical error, but technical error of such strategic weapons should not take place. What happened? What was wrong with the handling of weapons? So all of these issues come to light. What if there was a nuclear warhead? The payload was a nuclear thing. It would have amounted to war. What if a city, actually the people had died or it hit into a building? Not just there would have been an international condemnation, but a lot worse could have happened. So a probe has to take place. But imagine if Pakistan has a joint probe. So basically what we will be doing over there is, if there is a joint probe, you are sharing the technology. The ISI will come and they will say, okay, fine, this missile is made this way, we'll copy the same. So this is unwarranted, can't happen. You cannot share your key technologies like this. What fuel is being used, everything will come to light. What is the system by which the missiles are fired? They will review every single thing in that process. So that cannot be acceptable at all. Right, but we did have a joint probe on the Pathankot strikes, right? But it should not have happened, because then the ISI went into the Indian establishment and saw everything. Right then. So this is it. And thereby, such incidents should be stopped, investigation must take place, and it affects India's credibility as a nuclear power. It undermines, if such incidents take place, it undermines the strategic stability in the region, which US is very, very wary of. It is concerned about. Right, so this is this. And it affects India's global image of being a responsible nuclear power. Naturally, if your missiles go here and there, it is obviously a question mark over here. And therefore, we must establish credibility, and credibility will come via a transparent investigation, but not a joint probe. Now, again, coming to defense, Ukraine crisis delays AK-203 retrials. So, actually, I was watching a movie also based on this, the founder of this weapon, AK-47, right? Okay, so what I'm saying is that this rifle thing, I was watching this movie, and that is not important. I was watching as to why AK-47 is such a successful weapon, and what is wrong with the Indian version, that is INSAS. So we basically re-engineered this very reliable machine gun, and we created our own, and there were certain problems. And that is the thing actually why we are again having a relook as to why we should be importing the weapons from outside. And we are not really importing it. We are basically, this is a weapon, new variant, basically AK-203. It's an assault rifle. So India is to get 6.1 lakh of these, 1.6 lakh of these rifles from Russia. But we are not really importing it. We are basically making these. We will get the technology. It will be a joint collaboration between India and Russia, and these will be built together at Uttar Pradesh. So there is a focus of this government to make Uttar Pradesh as the hub of defense manufacturing. Atmanirbhar Bharat. So this will be done at Amethi. Okay, so this fine joint collaboration. This involves transfer of technology also. We'll have a know-how and we'll become self-dependent. We will not have to import these rifles, because more we depend on imports, it becomes very difficult. It affects the strategic autonomy. Now imagine, with reference to the Ukraine-Russia crisis that is taking place, we are concerned we cannot have an independent voice. We still have actually, as to how do we criticize Russia. If we do criticize, will this stop supply of military equipment to us? There are legitimate concerns over here. And this is the major expense that the government does, right? So 6.1 lakh, you can imagine, multiply this with the cost. Okay, so we need to have the technology. And when you make inside the country, you're creating more jobs also. It is in interest of national security. And you can also export these also. Right, okay, so AK-203 rifles. Now, India was also in the process of getting SIG-716, some rifle from USA. This was to be imported, and this is about 72,400 rifles. So now this deal was going on, but it is being believed that this will be dropped in priority, giving priority over the issue of domestic manufacturing, right? So that is the idea. Now coming back to this AK-203, now obviously most of it is imported. Very few equipments are coming from the vendors, Indians basically. The idea is that in future we improve the localization, that is the components that are made in India. One is, things are coming, you assembling it and then giving it over. But the idea is that ultimately the Indian industry, they make the parts, they share the parts, give it to this company and they manufacture it. So that is localization, and that will be the real multiplier effect, that is everybody benefits. So the idea is to improve the localization from 5% to 70% and eventually to 100% localization. Right. So in interest of this and this Atmanirbharta, we are also going to cancel this. It is likely that we will cancel this deal from USA, which was at a very nascent stage actually. It was at the stage of request for proposal, that we have asked, what is your proposal? You have this gun, what is your proposal? We are interested in this gun. So they will give their quotation, then we will have discussions and negotiations, basically that. Okay. Now this is about drugstores, government drugstores to sell nutraceuticals. So first of all, what is a nutraceuticals? One is pharmaceuticals. What is nutraceuticals? Nutrients. So your proteins, protein powder, malt based food supplements, immunity bars. So these are basically known as nutraceuticals, like supplements, basically supplementary things. So government has its own drugstores. And why does it have its own drugstores? To make sure that medicines or pharmaceuticals are available. Available is fine. They are accessible, right? They are accessible in key areas and they are affordable. Affordable medicines are being provided. So this is the main component. And the issue with our healthcare sector is that we have the highest out-of-pocket expenditure in the country. And there is lack of preference to address the concerns of the rural population or the poorer section, because you are not getting, the private sector is not getting money out of them. So that is a problem. So there is the problem of high out-of-pocket expenditure, that is the patient has to spend more money out of their own pocket. In foreign countries, more or less it is subsidized. So this is a problem. And imagine what is the component of medicines, the medicines that you buy. So this is a significant component of the expenditure that the patient makes. So if the medicines are affordable, naturally the out-of-pocket expenditure will come down. Now the government is making these drugstores. Naturally it will be part of a government scheme. So the name of the scheme is Pradhan Mantri Bharatiya Jan Aushadhi Pariyojana. Pariyojana means project. Jan Aushadhi. People, Jan Aushadhi. Aushadhi means medicines. So Pradhan Mantri Bharatiya Jan Aushadhi Pariyojana Kendras. Right. So these are the shops, and what are they selling? They are selling drugs, surgical instruments, etc. And these drugs are primarily generic medicines. So it is aimed at providing accessible, standardized and affordable generic medicines. Now the question arises, what is generic medicine? Generic medicines are basically, I'll give you a better example. I'll give you a paracetamol. You get fever, you get paracetamol. You may have Dolo. Dolo sales have increased, right, because of the pandemic. You may have Crocin. But essentially they are basically the same drug. I don't know the third company actually. But you get it. Dolo, these are basically branded drugs. So they are basically selling the same drug. The famous name is paracetamol. And the scientific name is something else, isoprene. I don't know what is the real name. So they are selling these branded drugs. So salt is basically the same. So what the government is doing is, they are getting these made. They are getting this intellectual property. They know this. Okay, fine. This is how the medicine works. And they are selling this as generic. That is not branded. And naturally, when it is generic, the idea is not to earn profit. The cost of medicine is very, very low. So they are still actually on the affordable side, but there are many other drugs which would have been very, very expensive had there not been generic medicines. So generic is basically unbranded. And you can see how the pricing is done. So pricing of generic medicines is done. Here it gives an example. Let's say there are 3 brands A, B, C, like Dolo, Crocin, etc. So there are 3 drugs. So their average is taken, the 3 ones that are famous in the market, and 50% of this. Right? So if the average of the drugs is coming at 100 rupees or 1000 rupees, so you can get the same at a 50% discount in these shops. Right, that basically the cost of drugs is 50% less as compared to the average of these 3 drugs. And this pricing of the drugs in India is regulated by an agency of the or authority of the government known as National Pharmaceutical Pricing Authority. National Pharmaceutical is clear, pricing authority, so one that claims the prices. And this is the agency, and you may believe UPSC may ask you it is under which ministry. Now you may think that it is pharmaceutical is healthcare, but no, this is coming under Ministry of Chemicals and Fertilizers. Chemicals, pharmaceutical is chemical. Even though it is dealing with healthcare, but the pricing is coming from this Ministry of Chemicals and this thing. In fact, this works under the Department of Pharmaceuticals. In fact, the scheme is also under Department of Pharmaceuticals, which comes under which ministry? Ministry of Chemical and Fertilizers. Right, so this concept is done. Now moving on to the next one. Chilka Lake area to be off limits of motorboats. Okay, fine. And why is it? Basically, migratory birds come, and this is a Ramsar site. That is, it's a very, very internationally important wetland. The land that is wet. So lakes, dams, etc. Okay. So migratory birds come. Your motorized boats will cause pollution. So it will make the habitat less conducive, less attractive for the birds to come. Thereby, in a certain part, motor boats are not permitted. Okay, right, so it is not permitted. Otherwise, you can go like this if you wish to. Okay, so this regulation has come from the Orissa, the state of Orissa. So the state legislation of Orissa has been invoked for stopping the permission of motor boats in this particular area. Okay, now I told you about Chilka Lake. It's very, very important. You must know about its geographical location. In fact, there was a question asked with reference to, this is the map you can see. So this area that you see, this is Chilka Lake. So this is the area, Asia's largest and world's second largest lagoon. Basically sea water coming in inland. So it has brackish water, saltish water. Okay, so this is Chilka. Now there was a question asked with reference to Koleru. Same, this is, I mean roughly I'm saying this curve over here, and you draw left to this, you get Koleru Lake. So like Chilka, there is Koleru. So the question was asked as to it is located between which 2 rivers, and the option was Mahanadi and Godavari, likewise Krishna and Kaveri, like that options were given. So we can imagine like Chilka, okay fine, Pulicat is also there, you can see some blue thing is there, it will not be very visible, check on the atlas. It is between which 2 rivers, like that a question can be asked. So basically it is checking your awareness about the map, the rivers, like that, without showing you the image, right? So this you should know, and you should know about other important wetland sites. Now Ramsar, as you know, Ramsar is basically a convention where the sites of international importance are protected, and I cross-checked multiple times, Chilka Lake is a Ramsar site. I had read that one particular wetland had come out of the Ramsar site convention, so that's why I had a doubt. Okay. So this is there. Now talking about migratory birds, you may know that migratory birds, since it is international, these birds travel internationally. So there needs to be an international mechanism for protection. Imagine Indian migratory birds are there. If they are disturbed in Sri Lanka or any other state, you will not like that. So some sort of international cooperation is there. And for migratory species, there is only one convention. That is Convention on Migratory Species, also known as Bonn Convention. Right. So Bonn Convention is associated with which of the following? migratory birds, migratory species. So this includes everything migratory, right? Not necessarily birds. Now, when we consider Chilka, one more thing about Chilka Lake is, which is it is very famous for, is how it has been able to transform. There is always a conflict as to human beings and natural habitat, and they're destroying that thing. It's getting destroyed. So Chilka Lake is a very good example as to how we have been able to incorporate sustainable development, sustainable tourism, where the indigenous population, the local population has benefited. At the same time, obviously benefited in terms of revenue, and which is the best source of revenue for fishing and tourism. So tourists coming, they get cooperation from the local people, and all of this is done in a sustainable manner because they know that their livelihood is there till the time the habitat is neat and clean. No, not neat and clean. I mean, it is obviously neat and clean, but not in the conventional sense. The wildlife is there. The habitat is preserved, so their life is also preserved in a way. Right, so sustainable tourism, ecotourism, those concepts come to play. It's a very good example of that. Okay, now coming to Chilka Lake, as you know, this is brackish water. It is a major attraction for Irrawaddy dolphins. Right, so you can actually see these species on the net also. And there is also a temple known as Kalijai temple located on the island of Chilka Lake. Now, international news. So I don't want to go very deep into this because time and again I'm not discussing anything now. Okay, so just an overview. So Russian airstrike hits army base, kills 35. See, I told you students are out. In fact, these people were saying that the Russians were saying that Ukraine is using the foreign students as human shields because foreign people are there. You don't want to strike. When you strike, a more international condemnation. At the moment, only Ukraine is speaking against you. Right, so that shield is gone. And ideally, it should have happened that Ukraine and Russia should have been able to resolve. At least it was in Ukraine's interest, but it hasn't happened. Okay. Right, so all this is going on. Cities are getting targeted at this point of time. US journalist shot dead, so that's not a good news. Okay, so this is there. Russia used phosphorus shells. So phosphorus shells are being used. And these phosphorus shells, what do? They create a lot of smoke. So they create a lot of smoke. What happens with smoke? Suffocation. Right. So they used phosphorus shells in Donbass attacks. And these are not to be used in, it's expected that it is used in open environments to give shield or to give cover to your troops so that the enemy cannot see them. But when you're hitting it in urban areas, naturally it's causing suffocation. It's like a biological warfare. Okay. This is also known as flaming onion. Now this is something that UPSC can pick on. Right, so flaming onion is known as, and in fact you can expect the UPSC making the paper right now. Okay, flaming onion. Now we'll read this news. So China says that we don't agree with this sanction. Sanction has been imposed by Russia, by US. So this is something that is unilaterally done by the USA. This is not that UNSC is saying or UNG is saying. No, it is by a country. So see, we don't agree with the sanction. We are not going to abide. So China says that we are not going to do this. So what USA is saying is, see, you want oil, fine. You want technology, fine. But if you don't go with the sanctions, you will have to face consequences. And basic understanding is that any country that, basically this is a legislation of the USA, that if USA imposes sanction on its adversary, that is, no country will trade with it. And if any other country trades with that country, then USA imposes a sanction on that country also. Now China is a big power. Let's see how this goes. But China is not going to stop over here, right? Okay. So we may have more of US China now. Let's see. Okay, fine. So this is basic thing over here. India, whenever they seek exemptions from the USA. Like in the case of Iran, where they wanted petroleum at a low price, or they wanted to invest in the Chabahar port project. or in the case of Russia, defense cooperation, etc. Okay, now talking about Iran, Iran claims missile barrage. Okay, so basically Iran fired missiles in Iraq, an Arab country, Iran, a Shia, Arab, Sunni, Iran, Shia. The Muslims, Islam, there is this conflict between the Shia and the Sunni. Okay, so very close to the US consulate. They didn't target the US consulate. There was some briefing that US consulate, that is where the ambassadors, etc., are sitting, like our IFS officers. So that has not been targeted, but very clear to this. So they are saying that we are basically targeting the Israelis. Iran doesn't have a good relation to anybody. Okay, so they are targeting the Israeli, who targeted some revolutionary group soldiers were killed by Israeli attacks in Syria. So they are basically avenging that thing. Okay, so this is there, and then what else is left? Adani Group inks deal for power projects in Sri Lanka. So this is Sri Lanka, this is India, but the map is not according to the scale, right? So the northern Sri Lanka that is there, this is the area which is Tamil dominated, which is very close to the heart of Tamils in India. Okay, so we are looking at more development in the northern part, and Adani Group has been able to get deals for power projects. So they'll be basically be making this new renewable energy, solar energy basically in this area, and they are going to get this. Furthermore, they are also getting access to a port. Now, no formal announcement has been made, but it is said that a deal has been done. Okay, last one. Opposition holds protest in Tunisia. Fine, so West Africa. This is the place from where UPSC has asked you 2-3 questions actually. So this is the place where Arab Spring has started. What was Arab Spring? Arab Spring was around 2010, 11, 12, 13, still going on. So where there was these dictatorial governments that were ruling. Dictatorial. So people who kept the powers with themselves, like Gaddafi in Libya. So they were ruling with a heavy hand. Now with education, with awareness, with globalization, everybody knows there is democracy. People have right to choose the government. If they don't like it, they have the right to overthrow these governments. They don't have. So especially in the West Africa, Arab world, this is West Africa is also Arab. And then Arab is Iraq, Saudi, this part, West Asia part is also Arab. Okay, sorry. So this is there, right? So yeah. So what has happened in Tunisia now is that Tunisia, there was Arab Spring. They were able to overthrow the dictatorial regime. But now what has happened is that again there is the rise of dictatorial regimes. So there is this leader known as Kais Saied, who is claimed power, who has enhanced his power and is basically removing the democracy from this region, right? So that is why it was in news. I just wanted to share the concept of Arab Spring. Yes, coming to the question. So I'll read the question first. Define tax buoyancy. Suggest measures for improving tax buoyancy in India. This is the question. And tax buoyancy is basically, something that floats. Have you been to swimming pool? So there is this floater also. So you push, or you have a mug of water in the bucket. So try pushing it, it will come up. So that phenomenon is known as, the more you push, the more it comes up. So that is basically buoyancy, the tendency to float. You put more water, it doesn't come down, it still keeps moving upwards. So likewise, tax buoyancy means when the national income is increasing, for simplicity, GDP increases. Likewise, the tax should also increase. Tax collected from the GDP should also increase, because tax is eventually on the GDP. Now consider this point, when you salaried more, you get more money, your tax will also increase naturally. So that is tax buoyancy. So likewise, in the case of the entire economy, entire GDP, how does with the national income increases, how is the collection from tax improving? Right, that is basically tax buoyancy over here. And this is dependent on number of people who are paying tax base, okay, number of people who are willing to pay tax, friendliness of tax regime, how easy it is to comply with the taxation system or tax administration. If it is very, very difficult, it is cumbersome, you may have a situation where people are not, maybe they are willing also, but still it's very difficult, maybe very expensive to file tax also. Why should I do it? Friendliness of tax administration. Or it may also happen that the tax levied are very, very high, so there is a tendency to hide income, that not declare proper income so that you evade the tax administration. That also happens. Okay, then reasonableness, how reasonable and simple are tax rates, right? One could be that, okay, fine, this is your salary, so your tax rate should be this much. Or you're being taxed at a very, very high rate and you feel, why not just not declare my proper income, or why not just send my money to a foreign country? And for best case scenario, people just actually moving out of the country altogether, brain drain. Right, so these are the basic factors that we have to consider when we look at tax buoyancy, and you can figure out as to where we stand at our time. Okay, so when we look at the tax base in our country, or let's first focus on tax to GDP ratio, which is a tax, obviously an indicator of tax buoyancy. So traditionally our tax to GDP ratio is around 17%. Okay, fine. So what is wrong with that? How do we compare? We say that the tax to GDP ratio in our country is less. OECD, developed countries, the taxation regime is on an average, it is about 33%, 1/3 of the income. Why is the tax to GDP ratio in our country less? And this answers why is the tax buoyancy less in our country. In a way, yes, by proxy, we can say this. And the reasons could be the tax base, the number of people who are actually paying tax is very, very less, right? In fact, the measures are actually here only. If you can improve this, naturally your tax buoyancy will increase. So the number of people who are giving tax. So in India, we have 6.25% who are paying tax. And bulk of this is the middle class salaried people. The rest are not paying tax basically. Okay. Now, how do we say it is bad? Well, in USA, it is 45%. 45% of the working are paying tax. In India's case, it is 6.25%, which is very, very poor. Naturally, it's about seven times. Okay, so tax base is less. And this again indicates that the burden of tax is very high on a certain section of population. Agriculture is not taxed. In fact, it should be brought under the tax regime. There are so many well-off, we're not talking of small and marginal farmers, but various farmers who are actually earning very, very well, but they are not paying any income tax. So that needs to be done. The tax base needs to be improved. Other way of improving the tax base is that disclosure system, etc. should be easy. The tax regime should be simple. Voluntary compliance should be encouraged. Naturally, voluntarily people are coming up, not that tax inspector is coming here and there, but voluntarily you want to go and you declare your income. So these are the things that needs to be done. And in this effect, there is a system, we are looking at a reform, like we had the reform with reference to the GST. So GST is also known as indirect tax code. Indirect tax. This is a tax that is directly being levied on the people. So we are working on the direct tax code, reforming the direct tax code. We are working on this. We're not yet there. So we are working on the friendliness of tax regime. We are looking at increasing the transparency, more automation. It's still not that friendly. It should be reasonable, making the system reasonable and simple. Right? If you arrange all these points, your answer will be ready. Just try it. Not able to do it, just ping me in the comment section. Now, this article that you read, there's a reason I read it at the end. This article is basically about tax compliance, and this is with reference to research that was done in the USA, which was saying that, read this line, where do my tax dollars go? People basically believe that what is the benefit of me paying tax? And this is something that even the Prime Minister had said in the early days, that we are paying tax, we are paying considerable amount of money. So what are the benefits that we are getting at the end of the day? The healthcare is so expensive. And for the same Indians, when they go to a foreign country, they are very willing to pay tax. I'm going beyond the article now. They are willing to pay the tax. They don't have a problem, even when it is 40% of their income. They know that, okay, fine, the government will take care of them. Healthcare, education, even housing, unemployment bonus, whatever, not bonus actually, compensation, right? So wage loss, whatever that takes place, that will be paid for by the government. From which money? From the taxpayers' money. But the citizen knows, okay, fine, I'm getting good, at the end of the day, I'm getting a good service. So here the citizen in India is left to fend for itself, and that is the problem. Then not everybody is paying tax, right? So this is the thing. So the government must also focus on improving what it does with the tax money, and the government would do well by better informing or bringing in transparency as to how the government is spending money, the taxpayers' money, on various things, right? So when there is more corruption, when there are more allegations, when there is secrecy, so such issues arise more often. The citizens see the government with the way the government is using their tax money with more skepticism. They are concerned about it. So more information should be made available. It should be made accessible. And actually the government should actually do more with reference to the promotion of welfare, and especially to those who are actually spending, giving the tax money. Now I'll add one more thing with this people we hear around us, we talk, they say that it is now, when I'm talking about tax, we're basically looking at the direct tax. Tax everybody pays. When you buy this pen, Parle-G, whatever you buy, you're paying or giving a tax. But it's only when we are basically referring to the direct tax over here. That is income tax, corporate tax, like that. Right then, so this essentially concludes our analysis for today. So thank you for streaming in to IASPrimers with me, Shubhashish. Bye-bye, take care and all the best.